Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm so glad you can join us today.
Yes, thanks for being here with us.
Our mission on this show, as you know, is to take a stack of research, a complex document, or just a really dense topic, and distill the absolute most essential, actionable insights for you.
Right, we want to make you instantly well-informed, but without the awful info overload that usually comes with reading dry organizational texts.
Exactly. And speaking of dry texts, today's deep dive is an extensive exploration of organizational architecture. We're looking at excerpts from a document titled 021 Leadership, Governance, and Decision-Making.pdf.
Which I know sounds like the most bureaucratic title imaginable.
It really does. I mean, the source material focuses heavily on church leadership and Christian mission mapping, but as we were reading through it, it became incredibly obvious that the lessons here are universal.
Oh, completely. It's all about human organization, authority, and collective decision-making.
Yeah, so whether you are running a nonprofit or leading a corporate team or, just you're trying to get a volunteer group to agree on a weekend project, these dynamics apply.
Because anytime you are trying to turn a group's passion into coordinated action, you run into the exact same human roadblocks.
Right. So the mission of this deep dive is to uncover why great ideas and deep passions so often stall out. We want to prove that governance isn't some boring administrative hurdle.
It's actually the load-bearing structure of any successful mission.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start by dismantling probably the biggest myth about why missions fail.
And this is a big one. It's the assumption that failure is caused by a lack of passion.
Yeah, think about it. You sit in a kickoff meeting, the vision statement is polished, everyone is nodding, you can feel the energy in the room.
Everyone is so fired up.
But then 3 weeks later, the work just grinds to a halt. And the immediate instinct is to look around and think, my team just doesn't care enough.
Right. You assume that if you just had more dedication, you'd cross the finish line. But the source text opens with a really bold claim that rejects that entirely.
Wait, so it's not a passion problem?
No, it argues that most mission strategies fail because they lack a structure to carry that passion without distorting it. Good ideas stall, responsibilities blur, and momentum drains away because the real bottleneck isn't vision, it's governance.
That is such a wild paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Because, enthusiasm is great, but it's structurally weak.
Exactly. The text uses this brilliant concept. It says, if mission is the fire, leadership is the hearth that contains and carries it.
Oh, I love that, a hearth.
Yeah, because without the hearth, the fire just burns everything down, right?
Yeah.
Or it fizzles out on the cold floor. Enthusiasm is highly combustible, but you need a container.
Wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
For a lot of people, especially in spiritual or creative communities, isn't structure seen as the enemy of the spirit or organic creativity? People hear governance and they just think of soul-crushing red tape.
Oh, absolutely. The text anticipates that exact cultural allergy. We tend to think organization kills vitality, but the expert response here is grounded in the text's theological framing.
How so?
It points to the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 14, where he notes that God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. The underlying argument is that order isn't the enemy of vitality, disorder is.
Okay, that makes sense. Order actually protects the energy.
Right. The text highlights God bringing order out of chaos in Genesis, and it gives a really practical example from the early church in the book of Acts, chapter 6.
That the story about the food distribution?
Yes. The community was experiencing explosive growth, but they had a massive logistical crisis. Widows were being neglected in the daily distribution of food.
Which is an existential crisis for a community founded on love, right?
Exactly. And the leaders didn't just tell everyone to be more passionate about the widows. They realized the main mission was going to collapse under logistical strain. So they appointed deacons. They built a structure to handle it.
So why should you, the listener, care about this? Well, if you are currently burned out on a project, you might be blaming your team's lack of dedication.
When you really should be blaming your team's invisible, messy decision-making structure.
Yes, you haven't built the hearth. So the fire is just burning a hole in your floorboards.
Which naturally leads us to the next big question. If structure is the hearth that holds the fire, who builds the hearth?
Right. This brings us to part 2. The actual role of a leader, which the text argues is radically misunderstood.
We tend to think of a leader as either a task manager or just the loudest visionary in the room. But the text defines biblical leadership as interpretive authority.
Interpretive authority. I mean, what does that actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon?
It means leaders don't just repeat the past, but they also don't just dream up abstract futures. They translate unchanging missions into a present-day context.
Oh, it's like a language translator in a high-stakes diplomatic meeting.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Because, you can't just do a literal word-for-word translation. If you do, you might accidentally insult the other person. You have to convey the intent and the nuance for the specific audience in the room. That's what a leader does with a mission statement.
Exactly. The text uses historical examples, like Moses. He didn't just hand over the law and walk away. He had to interpret it for a wandering people facing daily survival challenges.
And it mentions Nehemiah too, right?
Yes, Nehemiah didn't just look at a broken wall and see a masonry problem. He interpreted the ruins as a spiritual and communal crisis. A leader stands between the abstract mission and the messy reality and figures out what obedience looks like right now.
But stepping into that gap requires something really difficult.
What's fascinating here is that this requires the leader to be willing to say no.
Oof, people hate saying no.
They really do. But the text stresses that a church or any organization that cannot say no cannot truly say yes. Openness is so often confused with faithfulness.
Right, we think if someone is passionate, we have to let them run with their idea.
But passion without discernment just becomes noise.
It creates this awful cacophony. If you have 20 people on a team and the leader is too afraid to filter anything, you don't have an organization. You just have 20 freelancers doing their own thing.
And the cost of that vague leadership is huge. It forces the community to run on a marketplace of opinions.
Which is exhausting.
Completely. It burdens the most conscientious people who are trying to follow the rules, and it rewards the loudest, most aggressive personalities who just hijack the agenda.
So if a leader must interpret the moment and make the call, how exactly should they do it? I mean, structurally.
This brings us to part 3. The text breaks down 4 distinct models of decision-making, and this is where we get into the real mechanics of group dynamics.
Because every group makes decisions, but the method they use reveals their deep-seated theology and their actual values.
Right. It exposes what they really believe about authority. The text outlines 4 models: hierarchical, collaborative, team-based, and discernment-driven.
Let's start with the first one, hierarchical.
The strengths of this model are speed, clarity, and crisis management. Think of Moses leading the Exodus.
Yeah, when Pharaoh's army is behind you, you don't form a committee to discuss the Red Sea. You just need one guy to raise a staff.
Exactly. But every model has a shadow. The shadow of hierarchy is distance. The text warns that decisiveness can easily be mistaken for wisdom.
Oh, that's dangerous. You make a fast decision, but it's the wrong one.
Right. Speed can mask overconfidence, and it leads to a congregation or a staff that is informed but not formed.
Informed but not formed. So they comply with the rules, but they have no idea why it matters. They don't internalize the values.
Yes, they just blindly obey.
So if hierarchy naturally creates this distance, how does it ever work healthily?
Jesus actually redefined authority as service. A healthy hierarchy is visible but never proud. It's decisive but never detached. It uses authority to protect the mission, not to insulate the leader's ego.
Okay, that makes sense. What about model 2, collaborative? This one is super popular right now.
It is. The strengths are shared wisdom, broadened discernment, and deep ownership. People support what they help create.
But having lived through endless collaboration, the shadow here has to be the meetings. The endless, mind-numbing meetings.
You nailed it. The shadow is the temptation of endless consultation. The text actually calls it indecision disguised as humility.
Wow. Indecision disguised as humility.
Yeah.
It hurts. We say we want everyone's input, but really we're just terrified to make a choice.
Right. The expert insight here highlights the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15. The early church had a massive crisis over Jewish law and Gentile converts.
High-stakes stuff.
Very high stakes. And they listened, they debated, but crucially they concluded. James issued a final judgment. Collaboration must have an endpoint, or it just fractures the group.
So you gather the input, but then someone still has to make the call.
Exactly. Now, Model 3 is team-based.
This feels very tech startup to me.
Yeah.
Agile, flexible.
Yes. The strengths are flexibility, empowerment, and agility in complex environments. You push authority down to the local teams.
But the shadow is hidden silos, right? Teams optimize for their own success without caring about the whole organization.
Precisely.
It's like a rowing team, where everyone is rowing perfectly in time, but half the boat is rowing north and the other half is rowing south. The boat is tearing itself apart.
That's a great analogy. The expert solution the text argues for is coherence, not uniformity.
What does that mean in practice?
It means teams need defined decision thresholds. They need to know exactly what they can decide locally and what absolutely must be escalated to senior leadership. You give them a playground, but you build a very clear fence.
Okay, the last model is Model 4, discernment-driven.
The strengths here are patience, spiritual sobriety, and resisting the urge to treat every single open door as a divine command.
You actually slow down and wait for consensus.
Yeah.
But I can guess the shadow. Is it just doing nothing?
The text called it sanctified paralysis.
Sanctified paralysis. Oh, man.
This raises an important question. When does waiting become avoidance?
Yeah, because a lot of groups will say, oh, we are still discerning, when really they just don't want to deal with the conflict of making a hard choice.
Exactly. The text warns that delayed obedience is disobedience. Courage is the necessary companion to discernment. You can't just wait forever.
So even if you pick the perfect model for your group out of those 4, human nature still tends to break systems down over time.
It really does. The text identifies 4 specific leadership failures that quietly destroy mission mapping.
Let's get into part 4, the 4 fatal failures of leadership. These are ambiguity, inconsistency, over-centralization, and lack of accountability.
Let's start with ambiguity. It's the silent enemy.
Because it feels harmless, right?
Yeah.
A leader might say, let's keep it flexible, we're all adults. It sounds humble.
But it trains people to hesitate. When the rules aren't clear, your best people don't want to step on toes, so they just wait.
And the good idea just dies. The most responsible people get burdened with the stress of an undefined system.
Right. Then there is inconsistency. This destroys trust.
Because the rules keep shifting.
Yes. If you enforce a rule on Monday, but ignore it on Friday, people assume leadership is guided by mood or pressure rather than actual wisdom.
So they just stop trying. They learn to be reactive to the leader's mood.
Exactly. The third failure is over-centralization. This is the bottleneck. Everything funnels upward to one person.
I see this all the time in founder-led organizations. They think they're ensuring quality, but they're just choking the life out of the team.
The text references Jethro advising Moses in Exodus 18. Moses was judging every single dispute himself. He was exhausted. Jethro tells him to delegate. Over-centralization masquerades as excellence, but it actually prevents future leaders from developing.
If the founder decides everything, no one else ever learns how to make a decision.
Exactly. And the fourth failure is lack of accountability. This is the loss of follow-through.
Accountability gets a bad rap. People think it means punishment.
But the text frames it as stewardship. If you don't evaluate a project after it's done, you don't learn anything. Activity just detaches from purpose.
So what does this all mean? The text points out a really heavy moral weight to all of this. It says these aren't just technical glitches, they are moral failures.
Yes, asking volunteers or staff to navigate your messy, ambiguous system is actually a failure to love your people.
That is huge. If you are leading a team and your people seem unmotivated, ask yourself if they are actually just suffering from spiritual fatigue caused by an unreadable system.
Because clarity is a form of care.
Which brings us to part 5. Recognizing these failures is step 1. Step 2 is fixing the pipes. You have to make the system legible. You have to draw the map.
The text advises a really profound exercise here. Take a blank sheet of paper and map out exactly how an idea travels from proposal to execution.
But not how it's supposed to work, right? How it actually works in reality.
Right. And what this map usually reveals is terrifying. First, it shows where decisions get stuck in a holding pattern.
Ideas that go to a committee and vanish for 6 months.
Exactly. Second, it reveals opaque power. This is where authority is present, but clarity is absent.
Like when everyone knows a major donor really calls the shots, but it's never said out loud.
Yes. And third, it reveals where responsibility is assigned without authority, which is the fastest path to resentment.
Oh, absolutely. Being told you have to grow the program by 20%, but you don't have the budget to buy even a box of pens? You're held responsible, but your hands are tied.
It's maddening.
It's like looking at the blueprints of a house and realizing the hallway to the kitchen actually requires you to climb through a window. Once you see it on paper, you can't unsee it.
So how do you fix it? The text outlines a healthy flow called the mission pathway.
What are the steps?
It goes proposal to initial screening to theological review to budget review to approval, implementation, and finally, post-initiative evaluation.
That sounds like a lot, but I guess it clarifies exactly who is doing what. How does the text distribute those roles?
Well, the elders, or the board, handle theological alignment and major priorities. The big picture.
They are picking out carpet colors.
Exactly. Then the staff handles operational feasibility and execution. And they must have real authority, not just symbolic responsibility.
If they have a budget, let them spend it without asking permission for every little thing.
Right. And finally, the mission teams provide ground-level insight and proposals, but they have no binding authority to commit the church's resources on their own.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, when you clarify these rights, you don't eliminate tension, but you make the tension productive.
Because people can handle a no if the process is transparent. If they know why their idea didn't pass the budget review, they'll trust the system.
Okay, so we've mapped the process. But that only works if people actually know about it. This leads to part 6, documenting and reviewing the mission.
A church, or any organization, must document its governance. People need to know how decisions are made, and they need to institute recurring reviews of all priorities.
I can hear people groaning already. Documentation, recurring reviews. This sounds like corporate bureaucracy invading a spiritual space.
I know, it sounds dry, but the text explicitly addresses this. It says, bureaucracy controls, stewardship clarifies.
Oh, that's a great distinction.
The goal isn't a mountain of paperwork. It's to answer basic questions. Who proposes? Who approves? Who evaluates? It's about preserving institutional memory.
Because if a process relies on the way we've always done it, or the memories of 3 senior people, it will collapse the second they leave.
Exactly. Documentation is an act of pastoral care. It tells a new person, you don't have to guess how to succeed here.
And what about the review part?
Without scheduled reviews, an organization will just keep funding a 20-year-old partnership out of sheer inertia. They never stop to ask, is this still bearing fruit?
Think about your own life or organization right now. What habits or programs are you maintaining simply because you haven't scheduled a routine review to ask if they still align with your core mission?
It's a tough question to answer.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When an organization finally becomes legible, when you write it down and review it, trust skyrockets. People stop assuming hidden motives and just focus on the actual work.
Because the system is carrying the weight, not the interpersonal politics.
Exactly. So, to summarize our journey today, passion needs structure. A fire needs a hearth.
Leaders must interpret the mission for the present moment. They have to translate.
You have to pick the right decision model, avoid the 4 fatal failures, map your actual process, and write it down. Good governance isn't a barrier to the mission. It is the faithful embodiment of the mission.
Structure makes long-term obedience possible.
But I want to leave you with a final, unmentioned twist to ponder. We've spent this whole deep dive talking about how to build a clear, structured system so your current mission can thrive.
Right.
But think about this. Every rigid tradition that frustrates us today was once a brilliant innovation built by a previous generation to solve a problem. They built a hearth for their fire.
Yeah, that's so true.
As you build your perfectly clear, documented systems today, how do you ensure that the clarity you are building right now doesn't become the suffocating habit that the next generation has to dismantle 50 years from now?
That is the ultimate challenge.
How do you build a structure that knows how to dismantle itself when God calls you in a new direction? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I encourage you to take a blank sheet of paper today and start drawing your own map.